Hello, everybody. We're back, and as you can see, we're here with none other than Yat Siu. Yat Siu, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Yat Siu, we've been trying to get you on MSJ for the longest time. The reason being because MSJ is the official Upland UCN broadcaster.
Oh, nice.
We're also now the Sandbox ambassador. So the entire Upland community wanted to hear from you, and I really wanted to get you on MSJ because they watch us.
Sure, wonderful.
So I really want to get your comments on that, but it's great to have you here with us.
Of course, yes.
Let me start off with the hardest question.
Sure.
Upland and Sandbox have partnered. Finally they've partnered. How do you look at that?
I think it's very bullish. I think one of the things that I like about Upland is that it kind of created a Web 2.5-ish type of meta in terms of basically bringing people who are not Web3 natives into the Web3 world through an interface that was kind of much more, in some ways you could say a little bit of ahead of its time in terms of that thinking, whereas Sandbox is very much more Web3 natives. You have to have a MetaMask, you have to have a wallet before you can start using it, right?
Yeah.
And I think bridging the two actually creates an opportunity where you can sort of cross-mix the audiences, get more joint benefits, and at the end of the day, I think of it a little bit like, metaverses unite, right? In terms of basically, especially with the market the way that it is, I do think that, gaming and metaverse is in many ways grandfather mimetic in a way, right? Because it is about culture and it is about social, and so I think it's very exciting.
Sure. Have you seen the Sparklet token that Upland just launched, the utility token?
Yes.
What's your opinion on Sparklet token and the tokenomics and the way it has given the thing to the users and not to the investors? They've given Sparklet to the users that have actually used.
I think it's exciting. I think it's great. It's a kind of a sort of a community engagement model. I think one of the challenges with Sparklet has been around the fact that the metaverse meta hasn't been as popular, right? So, I mean, if Sparklet launched as a meme coin on Solana, probably would have a very different type of messaging. But I think what a lot of people might not fully appreciate is that memes really is culture, and it doesn't really matter what culture it is. So there's a kind of expression. In many ways, I would argue that Bitcoin is a meme in and of itself, right? I mean, if you think about it, right? It's got a sort of, let's call it very faith-based sort of, cult-like following in a way, but it's still mimetic in nature. And so Sparklet is the same, Sand is the same, right? They just maybe fallen a little bit out of favor short term, but at the end of the day, they've got a community, they're growing from that. And of course, there's work to be done, right? Once a token is launched, you actually have work that needs to be done. You've got to put it on more exchanges, you've got to talk about it more, you've got to bring institutional backing. And one of the things that I also keep saying is that in this era of tokens, the institutional support of the token starts to become more and more important. In other words, how do you stand out from millions and millions of tokens in the ecosystem, right? It's not going to be just because you're one meme and you're another meme, and maybe you hit the jackpot. That's possible because maybe Binance has an interest with you or something
or luck.
Exactly. That happens. I mean, that is to me more like a lottery.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, how do you distinguish that? And I think it comes down to, are they building? Are they serious? Does it have institutional backing? Is it there for the long term?
Yeah.
To me, that's actually what matters more longer term.
Absolutely. So we did a bit of due diligence, and we know you're an Uplander. You have an account in Upland. Do you play Upland?
Yes, so I wish I had more time to play, but as you know, I'm on the plane a lot and I'm all over the world. So I have an account on Sandbox, I've NFTs and so on, but unfortunately, time hasn't been sort of possible for me to do so. But as you may also know, Animoca is an investor in Upland, and I'm also on the board of Upland. So we do know about the progress, and we're very supportive of them.
Sure. Can we expect you at the next Upland Genesis week or any of the following one, if not this one?
I guess I'll talk to Dirk about that and see what we can do.
I think the community would love for Animoca and you to be there. We'd love to hear your guidance.
It would be a pleasure to be there. I think both the team there. We have regular calls, and I think again, timing was tough, right? Remember, they're based in the US and so on.
Yeah.
A lot of things that maybe they wanted to do, they just wouldn't do, right? Or shouldn't do. I think we have an opportunity with, a new direction.
With Donald Trump.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Basically, which I think would be great for a company like Upland that's based in America.
Absolutely. You've talked a lot about how the next bull run of Metaverse is going to come, and that's going to come from AAA games. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that?
Yeah, so maybe to clarify, it's not specifically just AAA games. It's gaming as a broad concept. But I would say that we've kind of gone through the second stage already, which is the social gaming, led very much by Ton and Telegram in terms of creating sort of user adoption in that area. And by the way, I think meme coins do the same thing. I think meme coins are onboarding lots of people into Web3 that are maybe not really into Web3 per se. They go there for economic reasons, and then they actually stay for the culture. And then actually, once you have a wallet and once you're there, you're like, oh, okay, what else can I do? Maybe I can trade some tokens. Maybe I can do something else. And then maybe I can start experiencing a Metaverse experience. Maybe I start playing a Web3 game, right?
Yeah.
But there are certain type of AAA type of gaming experience that I think are going to onboard much larger number of people just because they're already sort of something where people say, oh, I'd love to play that game, not because there's tokens involved or because they understand that meta. And so if you look at Off the Grid, by Godzilla, which is also one of our portfolios, they actually have a really, really high quality game that is now, early access #1 on Epic, for instance, trending also on PlayStation, Xbox, and has a gaming experience that is on par with an Apex Legends, with a PUBG, and that's actually where the next distinction needs to come from. And these games, by the way, take 3 to 5 years to make, right? It's not something that can be just done overnight. And I think this is where the first phase of gaming seemed to disappoint because they're like, oh, the game doesn't look that great, but hey, it's only been around for a couple of years, right? Now, after 3 to 5 years, actually you get those high quality games coming out as well, and I think we'll do that. It's important to know that the Web3 gamer, through Ton, through Axie, even Sandbox, to some extent Upland, a little bit different there, is that many of them are people who aren't traditional gamers in the classic sense, right? They're there because they're maybe farming, or they're there because they play they don't play games, and then they've experienced it that way because they own it, and it's a passive type of gameplay. Yeah. Whereas, and that, by the way, people don't sometimes fully appreciate. There's 3.4 billion people who play games, Web2 games. There's about 2.8 billion people who don't play games. Right, so what Web3 games are doing today, the classic ones, are they're actually onboarding more people who don't play games into gaming.
Yeah.
But games like Off the Grid, they're the ones who are actually moving the 3.4 billion into gaming.
Yeah. Because
what you're competing with is not a visual experience like an Upland or a Sandbox. What you're competing with is a visual experience like a PUBG or Fortnite and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of that next wave. And I think that will drive a lot of mass adoption in our industry.
Absolutely. Since you talked about a lot of bots, how do you, as a VC, how do you distinguish when you're looking at a project between bot users and real users?
So that's why we invested in things like Humanity Protocol, which basically determines whether you are real or not through the through your palm. I mean, there's also obviously World as well, but frankly, that's maybe a little bit more like we think a little bit slightly more dystopian because you got to sort of give up your retina of sorts.
Yeah.
But with Mochaverse, we're heavily focused on identity. And that to us is the key unlock here, but not identity for the sake of identity in terms of, hey, what's your digital ID, but identity to start building and accruing reputation.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, just philosophically, we don't think a bot is a bad thing.
Yeah.
We just think a bad bot is a bad thing, to be clear, right?
Absolutely.
So we think that an AI agent can have a good reputation. If you're a good AI agent that doesn't dump the token, that does stuff with it, that plays with the user, that creates a network effect, that's okay too. I mean, when you play with an NPC inside a game, is that bad? No. They help you with the game and they develop stuff. But what is bad if there's a bot that only is there to farm the token, extract value, dump the token, move on? To me, that's locust behavior, right?
Yeah.
That's basically just that's bottom feeder behavior.
Yeah.
And to me, that we need to get rid of because that's hurting our space. And we think with Mochaverse and Mocha ID, through the reputation layer, we can solve it. Because now projects are attesting reputation to them. Oh, are you a good user? Have you kept a token? Are you doing stuff with it? That means that in the future, you can then start sort of using that community and say, I want to onboard users that have users that actually are good users. And by the way, that's how good economies and good societies work, right? You want to work with good people. You don't want to work with bad people, for instance, right? You don't want to work with thieves. You want to work with people who you want to have who are good people and transact with you in a friendly way and are law-abiding, for example, right?
Sure.
And how do you know that? Well, you know it through the reputation. And if you've been working in a job for 10 years, well, he was not going to do something to lose a job. It's important for him, so you can trust him in a way, right? Or maybe he's gone to this type of university. Or maybe he's from this family, right? Even reputation from your family transfers to you. Oh, my dad was this person, or my mom was this person, because they're going to be the ones who are like, don't screw with my reputation, right? So there's elements around reputation, and I think reputation as a layer hasn't been developed yet until Mochaverse. So we're really excited about that, and we think that's going to solve that. But I agree with you, bots are a problem for the time being.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure if you know Upland Metaverse and us, the Metaverse Street Journal. We're a startup that's born out of Upland. So if Animoca is an investor in Upland, and you could think of Animoca being the parent of Upland. Animoca is essentially the grandparent of the Metaverse Street Journal.
Well, you're like a grandchild.
Yeah. So
it's great.
My question is there a value proposition for micro VCs who are maybe not investing in full-fledged billion-dollar businesses, but small projects that are building within projects?
Oh, absolutely. Always. I mean, I think of Web3 as an economy, in an economic sense, like a nation state. So when you invest in a country, do you just invest in government bonds? Or do you invest in a telco? Well, you might invest in that restaurant. Or you might invest in that bakery. Or you might invest in that business that is actually adding a lot of value and creating glue in the network of the fabric of that society, but actually isn't maybe the biggest thing there is. And it doesn't come down to, by the way, how much value you generate per se. It has to do with the impact you can create that will then give you that value. For instance, if you're active, then maybe having a large stake in your local small business is more impactful for you than maybe having a minimal stake in a telco that will build the infrastructure. And that is my point here, right?
Why do you think we haven't seen the emergence of micro VCs investing in small startups building within, let's say, Sandbox or Upland or Decentraland or any of the metaverses?
No, I think it's already happened. In fact, I think it's happening every day. It's just not happening maybe in the way that you think, as in it's in a specific ecosystem. But in Web3, it's happening all the time. Every person who makes money in Web3, what do you think they do? They buy another token.
Yeah.
They put it in DeFi. They're investing in some activity. So it's already happening. The only thing is maybe they're not putting it in a project in Upland, or maybe they're not putting it in a project of Sandbox per se. Some do, by the way, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't reached that scale, but actually the way to think of it is you have this entire ecosystem that's already there. Every Web3 token holder is actually an investor.
Yeah.
Right? And to me, by the way, that I think is the secret of Silicon Valley and the secret of why Web3 in many ways will continue to perpetuate and grow. Yeah. Because when you think about Web3 as an ecosystem, the capital is captive. You make money, I mean, maybe out of your own experience or maybe people you know, what do you guys talk about? A new project, right?
Yeah.
Where could you invest in? It's like investing and finding projects, almost like a sport, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, that's Silicon Valley, right? The difference between Silicon Valley and say like a New York, for instance, or London, yeah, they do investing, but in Silicon Valley, it's a sport, right? An engineer, a first-year engineer might invest in a startup.
Yeah.
A first year in most other countries around the world won't invest in anything, right? As an example, right? And I think in Web3, it's the same thing. If you're basically, you could be a fresh grad, so to speak, in the Web3 world, and you've made some money on tokens, and the first thing you'll probably think about is, well, where else can I put it?
Yeah, absolutely. According to you, what's going to trigger the mass adoption in Metaverse? Something like the translations did for Facebook? Because when they started translations, that's when the J-curve started for Facebook.
Yeah,
What's that trigger for Metaverse?
I think Metaverse, first of all, I think is one of those complicated words that mean so many different things. When you talk Metaverse, people tend to think about VR goggles and so on, and I think it distorts the actual vision of what the open Metaverse is.
Yeah.
But I think gaming is going to drive that, because gaming is the mass adoption cycle. Things like Ton and Telegram enable the users to come into the space, and then they start looking for different experiences. I mean, just think about mass adoption for things like the smartphone. What was the thing that most people did in the first few years on the smartphone? It was actually playing games. You look at the top grossing charts, it was all things, right? What actually created the growth of Facebook? Farmville. Most people forget that it was actually gaming that built it. And what's the thing that actually brought mass adoption broadly in terms of compute and AI and mining? NVIDIA, and what grew NVIDIA? Gaming. So we think gaming is going to be that initial trigger.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a very subjective question,
Sure.
and this is totally your opinion. Do you think when GTA 6 launches, it's going to have a link to Upland, Sandbox, or the other metaverses where you can transport from a portal?
I'd love it, but I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think so is because, one, this is a game that has been developing for an incredibly long time, and I think they haven't thought, when they started working on it, they haven't been thinking about Web3 at all. That doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in the future as an add-on, but for the time being, I think it won't launch like that, I'm afraid. But I do think that there'll be many other platforms that will leverage basically things like, a sandbox and Upland. That for sure.
Sure. I know you're a busy person, so I'm not going to keep you for long. However, I would love for your few thoughts for the Upland community, if you can just talk, and then for Sandbox community, because they both watch us. So any piece of advice, because a lot of the community things that we don't hear from Animoca family enough. So they're always wanting to get a comment, or what does Yat Siu think about us? What does he think about our community? What does he think about our metaverse? So I think they'll love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, one of the reasons we led the round into Upland and why we're so excited about Upland is we think of it not just in terms of adding sort of the Web 2 to Web 3 meta, just in terms of the gameplay experience. You could argue that it's not as interactive as other games, but actually what you're doing is you're bridging the real world. In some ways, I would argue you're like the virtual RWA of sorts, right?
Yeah.
You have San Francisco, or you might have New York, or eventually you'll have Hong Kong. And that's actually the connection points that we have. And if you might remember, what are we all based on? Actually, geolocation in geography is a huge connector in culture, right? The first thing you see when you see someone, you might think is from an area is, are you from the city? Or maybe if you're connecting with someone for the first time, where do you live, right? Actually, what are you trying to do? You're trying to understand what culture he is and where he's from, and you're trying to build that connection, which is very natural for us, right?
Yeah.
So I think of that sort of geolocative gameplay, if you will, as a very strong glue connector to society. And that's actually why we're so excited about Upland.
Yeah.
And we've seen many examples in the past where that actually becomes a really strong commercial model around that as well.
Yeah.
Virtual real estate. Some of the very successful games out there actually are leveraging essentially physical real estate, but in a virtual sense, because it can also have that aspirational play, right? And that remains the same. Again, 23 particularly was a tough year for just the whole industry as a whole, and everyone sort of cycling through those sort of scenarios. But at the end of the day, we're bullish and supportive on where Upland will go. And again, as I said, I think 25 could be a really good year for Metaverse.
Yeah. How about Sandbox?
Well, Sandbox, you saw the token prices have been rising. Alpha Season 4 is right now.
Yeah.
I think it's going quite well. I think it's record numbers in terms of user growth and so on. And in particular, I would say there's, now that it's more and more moving into a DAO, pay attention a little bit to what's being proposed, because we think there's some really exciting things happening in the Sand DAO as well, on top of course, Sandbox, the game in and of itself, right? So very, very bullish on Sandbox.
Yeah, sure. Well, everybody, that was Yat Siu. Before I end this interview, I'll leave you with the same saying that we always say: you be the arbiter of truth, the viewers of the Metaverse Street Journal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yat Siu.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Introducing Sparklet, the utility token in Upland, an immersive Layer 1 gaming platform that empowers players to build and create like never before. Spark is a utility token in Upland that enables players to build on their properties, develop neighborhoods, manufacture items, and create unique assets that set their empire apart. Sparklet is the resource required for entrepreneurs to create content, experiences, and assets via no-code user-friendly tools. Upland entrepreneurs and creators use Sparklet to build shops, factories, and showrooms for their meta ventures and to create user-generated content and mint virtual assets. Third-party developers use Sparklet to establish developer shops for map presence and to implement zero-code Web3 and NFT strategies on the Upland platform. Partners and brands even need Sparklet to create virtual assets for events, minigames, and competitions, powering their metaverse strategies for fan engagement and monetization. Sparklet is powering the future of Upland, driving creativity and innovation in the virtual property strategy game you love. So don't miss out on the opportunity to take your Upland experience to the next level. Get Sparklet and start building today. Everyone is talking about the immersive gaming platform called Upland, where you can create your ultimate digital universe by buying virtual versions of real-world properties and unlocking endless possibilities. In Upland, it's easy to become a digital landowner, build up your properties, create shops, manufacture cars, and even earn WebX coins while you play. You can race your cars or fly your private planes across your digital empire. But it's not just about building, it's about connecting with the most active and vibrant community in the space. Our in-game chat and activity feeds allow you to network and build meaningful relationships with other players, share strategies, and celebrate your successes together. Not only that, you can unlock a world of Layer 2 applications and experiences built by players just like you, adding even more depth and excitement to your Upland journey. Don't miss out on the chance to immerse yourself in this extremely entertaining gaming platform. Upland is available now on iPhone, Android, Mac, or PC.